Barca are clear of Madrid, but neither of them can win the Champions League. And it's not a Raphinha, Mbappé, or Yamal problem. I call Yamal the second greatest player ever, possibly. And the dribbling numbers of a Messi, which 2025 Yamal was, the passing creative numbers of a peak Messi, with 80% of the big game scoring of a Messi, which Yamal factually was in 2025, I think is arguably the second best player of all time. 2025, look at the dribbling and passing numbers. He scored in 3 or 4 El Clasicos, in a Champions League quarter and semi-final, in a Nations League quarter and semi-final as well. And then it's like, you gotta bring up Las Palmas, Eibar, Mallorca, when Barca were cruising to a league anyway, to discredit his scoring in games I don't really care about, like I guess. But now you're seeing he hasn't scored in any of his last 5 big games, dating back to that Nations League final versus Portugal, including no goals in all 4 big games this season. And it's fine, you're still getting arguably the best in the world. He's playing well, to be clear, in these big games. You are getting regression though, that I should have been able to see coming, where he's more in line with a Neymar, Dino, all-time playmaking with the pass and dribble, but struggles to score in the big games, rather than closer to a Messi in big games. I do multi-year peaks, and Yamal's multi-year peak being the second greatest ever, that claim is faltering. I'll admit that big game level of scoring is just looking real fluky, but that 1-year peak, hey man, and he may not reach that peak for the next 4 or 5 years, and it's still gonna be an all-time 1-year peak. But I would like to see it over a few years, see how generally good Lamine Yamal is. But Raphinha's third multi-goal game in his last 4 El Clasicos in Sunday's Supercopa final. Raphinha is cooking right now, 4 goals between the Supercopa semis and final, and Raphinha is maybe a top 3 to 4 player in the world when healthy. This season and the whole last season, he's been top 5 levels. And he just needs to stay healthy and show me these levels over a longer sample. But I think only Yamal and Mbappé are out of reach when we're talking the best players in the world. I'm not there yet to put him above Haaland, but I could be soon. With all that said, those two I really wanted to talk about. I think the dysfunctional defense, that trash highline defense that exposes so much at the back, will cost this truly all-time attack. Raphinha and Yamal were probably the best performers of the season last season, in my opinion. And versus Inter, Barca's attack was ticking, scored 6 goals, but across the 2 legs, they conceded 7. That's a catastrophic defense, where I don't think the individual defenders are even as much to blame as the scheme, and it cost the best attack in the world, one of the best attacks we've ever seen. To be quite honest with you, the defensive gap between them and a defense is sustainable, as Arsenal's, for example, is too big for them to ultimately win a Champions League, in my opinion. But Madrid lose yet another big game, El Clasico final in the Supercopa to Barcelona. Xabi is fired this early in the season. What he did with Vini, subbing him off early in that first El Clasico, most memorably. And to be clear, the Supercopa final, Vini asked to be taken off with cramps yesterday. But again, that first El Clasico, subbing Vini off for no good reason when he was bowling, and then Vini reacts badly, and it's like, I guess, the way Vini was treated for Alonso to prove a point, it's awful. Alonso wanted to do the guard of honor for Barca after that final. Mbappé didn't. The player sided with Mbappé, so it's very clear Alonso just didn't have control of that locker room. Alonso was picking Gonzalo over Endrick. The level of favoritism for Gulero or against Vini, the big game level from this team, it just wasn't working. But Vini is bold in both El Clasicos this season now. Cooked Koundé yet again, and it's just a flow state versus Barca. Coming into this game though, he was on an 18-game streak of no goals. He's been so inconsistent since the I'll do it 10 times more after losing that Ballon d'Or. 12 goals in the calendar year of 2025 when his teammate had 60 plus, and it's not an Mbappe's taking up his spaces on the left. Mbappe made Vini worse. Excuse. How good was Vini versus City versus Atletico when Mbappe hasn't been there? He's been trash, and that lack of consistency is hurting the team. Jude was bad in the El Clasico yesterday. Looks busy on a football pitch, mastered that art for long stretches of games, whole halves of seasons. He has to be better. Barca are clear of Madrid. Madrid's defense is about as dysfunctional as Barca's high line, but Barca are closer to the best attack ever than what Madrid's got going on. Madrid's been trash since Mbappe's been there, but they've been a win through individual brilliance, Harambo, and last-minute miracles. Definitely favorable calls FC for years now. We may get outplayed, but we'll get every break we need. We'll win the penalty shootout versus City after they looked better over the two legs in actual regulation in the 2024 Champions League. Favorable calls in the 24 UCL semis versus Bayern, that goal called off. In the 2022 UCL, if Benzema doesn't get away with fouling Donnarumma, PSG knocked the eventual UCL winners Madrid out in the round of 16 and 22. But Madrid, they have been winning on the margins. Whatever needs to go right for them seems to go right on those very thin margins, and that's winning. That's what ultimately matters. But Mbappe is the last person to blame, to tell you the truth. You were thin margins from not winning in 22 and 24, the Champions League. What people really have to understand is a team winning comes down to 22 players on a pitch and a ref, and all those people contribute to the outcome of the game. Once you judge Mbappe individually, which you should judge individuals, it's in the word individually, you'd see that Mbappe had an all-time scoring calendar year in 2025. He was at worst the top 5 level last season, at worst the top 3 level this year, and he is their attack. And he comes on 75 minutes into Sunday's Super Copa El Clasico final and is literally being blamed, and they're using this L against Mbappe. He can individually go out there and score a hat-trick versus Barca with the league on the line, and that team L goes against Mbappe as an individual. If he scored in the 15 minutes remaining in the game, and he only had about 15 minutes off an injury, he would have been the only player in history to score in 5 straight El Clasicos. Mbappe scored in his last 2 games versus Atletico, which of course they didn't win, but the level of threat, it's drawing fouls, penalties, scoring free kicks, hat-tricks versus Barcelona. Factually, he's done all these things and still gets blamed when he's consistently the great player in this team, playing at the top 3 level, at worst level right now. And PSG win the UCL and win all this without him. Real Madrid go from winning the UCL and league to the trash they are now. So I get you trying to connect the dots, but when you can't understand winning is deeply a team thing, dependent on several factors and people outside of just one person, you start wondering how clearly impactful to winning players. How impactful are they? This reminds me of Neymar winning no major trophies with Brazil, but Brazil winning the Copa America in 2019 with Neymar injured and not playing. Neymar won nothing with PSG as the actual best player. Dembele won a UCL as the best player, but we know Neymar was a more impactful player to winning, or I hope so, we do, than Dembele. We know Neymar was very impactful for Brazil, or I hope we know that. A peak Halley was an injury in Game 7 of the finals, or Pascal from being a number 1 on a championship team. Jaylen Brown was a number 1, arguably on a championship team. Those could have been your last 2 leaders to titles, but a peak Kevin Durant and James Harden, who we all know are better, more impactful to winning. I hope we know that. Couldn't do it, I guess. Like, I don't care about team things when individuals need to be judged individually, and Mbappe is still arguably the best in the world when you judge individuals individually.